Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe because that was easier. Easier than noticing the woman who never spoke, who logged 12-hour shifts without complaint, whose name they could never quite remember. Staff Sergeant E. Concord, the quiet one, the communications girl. To them, she was background noise in a building full of louder voices. Invisible, efficient, forgettable. Fort Campbell, Kentucky. 600 hours. The hum of radios blended with the smell of burnt coffee and dust from the morning drills. Rows of operators adjusted headsets, checked frequencies, scribbled coordinates. The air vibrated with coded chatter and mechanical rhythm. A symphony of war fought in signals instead of bullets. Sat at Station 4, headset snug, posture precise, voice steady. Charlie 27, hold eastbound on Route Bravo, she said softly into the mic. Confirm grid 615. Her tone was calm, measured, the kind of calm that came from repetition or maybe survival. She logged each transmission, fingers moving with unthinking precision. 2 years here. 2 years of silence, of blending in, of doing everything right without ever being seen. Across the room, Sergeant Mills leaned back in his chair. Hey, Concord, he called out, loud enough for others to hear. When you're done playing radio DJ, maybe you can do some real work. A few snickers followed, the kind that feed off conformity, the herd's approval. Didn't look up. She stopped flinching at those things a long time ago. Silence was her weapon, silence and patience. Her hands moved across the console, checking channel frequencies, adjusting bandwidth. No one noticed the faint calluses on her fingertips, not from typing, but from rope burns that never fully healed. No one noticed how she sat too straight for someone who had never been in combat. They just saw a quiet operator. They didn't see the woman who once led communication teams deep in enemy territory. They didn't see Shadow 4. But she still dreamed about them, the ones who didn't make it out. Sometimes she'd wake up at 300 hours, sweat pooling under her collar, the ghost of a Syrian desert wind in her lungs. Sometimes she still heard their voices through static. Shadow 4, do you copy? Shadow 4, fall back. Then silence. She blinked, exhaled, forced her focus back to the glowing radio screen. Routine kept her sane. Routine kept her safe. Lieutenant Carter approached, clipboard in hand, eyes glazed with authority. Make sure you log those convoy times accurately, he said like an afterthought. We can't have communication errors. Yes, sir, replied evenly. He walked away before she finished. She didn't mind. Being underestimated had its advantages. No one looked too closely at the invisible, and that was exactly how she survived. The morning passed in waves of coded chatter, helicopter clearances, weather relays, supply confirmations, nothing unusual, nothing to suggest that one of the most dangerous intelligence operatives in U.S. military history was quietly managing traffic patterns from a Kentucky office. Then at 9:32 hours, everything changed. Attention communications, a corporal announced. We've got a general on deck, inspection mode. Heads turned, straightened uniforms, nervous glances. Lieutenant General, 3 stars, sharp eyes, sharper silence, stepped into the room. The kind of woman who carried command like a gravitational field, every movement deliberate, every glance heavy. Kept working, didn't even look up. The less noticed, the better. General's gaze drifted across the room, assessing. She wasn't here for ceremony. She was here for answers. Recent anomalies in classified frequencies had raised alarms, encrypted transmissions, echoes of protocols buried years ago. The kind of echoes that shouldn't exist. Her eyes landed briefly on Station 4. A quiet operator with perfect logs and 0 infractions. Forgettable, but the general's instinct, honed through decades of reading battlefields and bureaucrats alike, lingered. Something about the posture, the precision. Then it happened. A distress call burst through the static, raw, desperate. Priority medical evacuation required. Grid 774 Alpha. Multiple casualties, immediate response needed. Every operator froze for a split second. Then they all looked toward the senior controller, except didn't wait. Her training bypassed thought entirely. Her fingers danced across switches. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Tango 7 actual, she said firmly. Stand by for emergency protocol. Shadow frequency active. Casualty evacuation approved. Route designation Alpha Bravo confirmed. The room went silent, radios hummed, keyboards stilled. Across the floor, General's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the concrete. Those words, that tone, that rhythm. Only Shadow 4 operatives talked like that. And Shadow 4 was dead. The General's pulse slowed. Her mind replayed the impossible. Tango 7 actual, shadow frequency. That phrase had been decommissioned 5 years ago after Operation Silent Thunder collapsed in Syria. All 12 operatives declared KIA. Files sealed. Records erased. She looked again at the woman at Station 4. Calm, expressionless, headset still on. Shadow 4 whispered under her breath. Froze, the sound of that name sliced through her composure. 2 years of careful disguise cracked in one heartbeat. She turned slowly, met the General's gaze, and for the first time in 2 years someone really saw her. General moved forward, each step deliberate. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "I need to speak with you now." They left the communications floor under a dozen confused stares. Mills smirked, whispering something about the radio girl getting grilled. But there was unease in his tone, something different in the way the General had looked at her. In the secured briefing room, closed the door and activated the white noise generator. Confidential mode. She turned Shadow 4. Spine straightened instinctively. That word unlocked a version of herself she'd buried deep, disciplined, alert, dangerous. "Ma'am, I don't understand," she began carefully. "Don't insult me," the General interrupted. She placed a classified folder on the table. The red stamp glared under the fluorescent light. Top secret, Silent Thunder. His voice softened but stayed precise. 5 years ago, 12 operatives vanished in Syria. No bodies, no radio contact. Satellite imagery confirmed the safe house compromised. We closed the file. But now I hear a voice use terminology that only they knew. That voice was yours. Didn't answer. Her throat felt dry. Opened the folder. Staff Sergeant Elizabeth Concord, Communications Specialist. No special ops training, no classified missions. She looked up. "But that's not your real file, is it?" The air tightened. The hum of the white noise generator filled the silence like distant artillery. His fingers twitched slightly, a tell she couldn't hide. The General watched, measuring every micro-expression. "You've been hiding in plain sight," she said finally. "Why?" Looked down at her hands. The calluses, the faint scars. She thought of the explosion, the safe house engulfed in fire. The last radio signal fading under enemy interference. "I didn't want to," she said quietly, "but someone had to finish what we started." The General's eyes narrowed. "You continued the mission." "I finished it," corrected, "or at least I tried." Leaned forward. "You've been conducting unauthorized intelligence operations, Sergeant." "I've been doing my job," replied, her voice steady now. "Tracking the same arms network that wiped out my team, same routes, same transfers, same encrypted codes. They thought they ended Shadow 4, but they only killed the visible part." The General exhaled slowly. "You understand the magnitude of what you're saying?" "Yes, ma'am." "You're accusing someone of leaking top-level coordinates. You're accusing." "Someone wearing stars, ma'am." The General froze. For the first time in years, uncertainty crossed her features. Silence. Then a soft hum from the terminal as inserted a small encrypted drive from her pocket. The General hesitated, then nodded. The screen flickered to life: maps, ledgers, voice samples, intercepted transmissions. Months of surveillance, methodical, surgical, impossible for one person to collect without detection. You did all this alone. I had help, said, from ghosts. The general almost smiled, almost. For 5 long minutes, neither spoke. Only the faint hiss of static filled the room. Then made her decision. Shadow 4, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of both command and respect. You're officially reactivated, effective immediately. Looked up, there was no surprise in her eyes, only relief, the kind that feels like permission to finally breathe. Stood, we finish this properly, no more hiding. Yes, ma'am. When they stepped out of the briefing room, the hallway seemed brighter somehow. Conversations paused. People turned to look. For once, the quiet operator didn't shrink from their gaze. Her stride was deliberate, purposeful. Someone whispered, "What just happened?" No one answered. By 1800 hours, a single classified line appeared in the communication log. Shadow 4 operational, mission parameters classified, authorization Gen. And as the fluorescent lights flickered across the silent office, removed her headset and looked out the narrow window toward the fading sun. Somewhere out there, the same network still moved weapons, still funded chaos, still believed she was dead. She flexed her hands, the same hands that once pulled teammates from burning rubble. Sometimes the quiet ones aren't invisible. They're just waiting for the right frequency to answer. And when they do, the whole world hears. The night was too quiet for Fort Campbell, too still, too expectant. Sat alone in the operations bay long after the others had gone. The room smelled faintly of cold metal and burnt coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed, their rhythm matching the pulse in her neck. In front of her, screens glowed with encrypted data streams, fragments of communication networks, faint patterns buried in digital noise. She leaned forward, studying a line of coded text, same encryption key, same time signature, the same one that haunted her since Syria. 5 years ago, she'd promised 12 voices she'd bring truth back home. Tonight, she intended to keep that promise. The door opened behind her, heavy boots, purposeful steps. Couldn't sleep either. General's voice carried a rough edge softened only by exhaustion. Didn't look up, wasn't planning to. The general moved closer, folding her arms. You've been off the grid for 5 years, Sergeant. Hiding in plain sight, gathering data, watching. You survived an operation that killed 11 others and never told a soul. That's extraordinary. Survival isn't extraordinary, said quietly. It's just unfinished work. Studied her, you had authorization once. You don't anymore, you kept gathering intel. Why? Hesitated. Because the network that killed my team never stopped operating, I could still hear them. Same phrases, same voices. Every time one of our convoys was ambushed, it was the same pattern, same leak. The general's jaw tightened. You're implying an internal breach at the Pentagon. I'm not implying, ma'am, she replied. I'm confirming. Said nothing. Her silence wasn't disbelief, it was calculation. The general moved beside her, looking at the monitor. Show me. Tapped the keyboard, pulling up satellite timestamps, transaction logs, intercepted voice relays. The evidence unfolded like a confession. Arms shipments traced through shell companies, encrypted routed through private contractors, field transmissions that mirrored Shadow 4 protocols. At the bottom of the screen, one line blinked in faint red. Project Bastion, authorized by PE. His eyes narrowed. That's my clearance code. Looked at her. Not anymore, ma'am. Someone your digital signature 2 years ago. Used it to mask financial transfers and coordinate off-book movements. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, the general broke the silence. Then they've been watching me too. Nodded, they've been watching all of us. The general turned away, packing once, twice, then stopped. If what you're saying is true, we can't trust anyone inside this base. We move wrong and they'll bury this deeper than we can dig. His voice softened. That's why I stayed silent. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. The weight of 5 years pressed against her ribs. You ever wonder what it costs to stay invisible, ma'am? Looked at her every day. His hands trembled slightly, the first visible crack in her composure. They were my family, my team. We were supposed to disappear together, but I lived. And sometimes living feels like betrayal. The general didn't respond with comfort. She just placed a hand on shoulder, not as command, but as recognition. We finish what they started, she said. A small nod. Yes, ma'am. By morning, the operation had a name again, Silent Thunder, Redux. But this time, there would be no official authorization, no recorded orders. Just 2 women, one carrying authority, the other carrying ghosts. They met in a windowless conference room. The blinds drawn. Files spread across the table like puzzle pieces of a truth too dangerous to exist on paper. Pointed to a photograph. This man, Colonel James, Logistics Command. 2 years ago, he was reassigned from intelligence oversight to procurement analysis, a demotion on paper but not in influence. He had full clearance during Silent Thunder. Frowned, approved our coordinates. That's how they found us. Nodded grimly. He's clean on the record, but I've seen that expression before, a man who profits from shadows. Leaned forward. I can reach him, off record. There's a military contractor in Nashville he uses for private logistics transfers. Calls it training evaluation. It's a front. The general's eyes hardened. You'll need backup. I don't work well with teams anymore. Too bad, said. You're not Shadow 4 alone anymore. I'm assigning Captain Lewis cyber analysis, former NSA field. Almost protested, then stopped. Maybe it was time to stop carrying it all alone. The general's tone softened. You've been living in silence for too long, Sergeant. Let someone else hear what you hear. 2 nights later, Nashville. Rain fell in fine needles across the asphalt lot outside the contractor's warehouse. Floodlights buzzed faintly in the dark, throwing silver light across puddles. Adjusted her earpiece. Entry point secure, Lewis status. His voice came through with calm precision. Security feed looped, you're clear. Inside, rows of cargo crates stood like silent witnesses. Moved with quiet efficiency, every footstep measured, every breath counted. Her gloved fingers traced the serial markings on one crate. AG 47, Damascus route. Her pulse quickened. These shipments matched the exact routes used by the arms network in 2019. She activated her wrist cam. Got visual, uploading now. Then the sound of footsteps, slow, confident. She turned, weapon raised. Relax, Sergeant, said a voice from the shadows. No need for dramatics. Colonel stepped into the dim light, raincoat collar raised, eyes sharp and amused. I was wondering how long it would take before one of you ghosts came looking. His jaw clenched. You killed 12 people. He smiled faintly. 12 assets. You call them people, I call them variables. You of all people should understand the calculus of containment. Containment, she hissed. You sold intel that got Americans killed. And it built peace in regions your team couldn't even pronounce, he replied, stepping closer. We trade lives for stability every day. Don't pretend you're different. His weapon didn't move. Where's your buyer? Chuckled, still asking the wrong questions. You think this ends with me? The real operators don't sit in warehouses. They sit in offices, the kind with Pentagon letterheads. The words hit like a hammer. Before she could reply, a faint buzz came through her comm, Lewis whispering. We've got heat signatures, multiple inbound, 10 seconds. She didn't think, she moved. Glass shattered as armed men stormed through the side entrance, shouting orders. Dropped behind a crate, returning controlled bursts of suppressive fire. Her movements were surgical, not the panicked chaos of survival, but the instinctive rhythm of someone who'd lived this 100 times. Lewis's voice came through again, urgent. Extraction route compromised. I'm rerouting the van to the east loading dock. 2 minutes. His breath came sharp, focused. She rolled behind cover, grabbed a flash charge, tossed it clean and low. The explosion of white light disoriented the attackers just long enough for her to move. When she reached the loading dock, was gone. Her comm crackled again, voice status. Target escaped, replied, her voice calm but heavy. He knew we were coming. There was a long pause on the other end. Then someone on our side is feeding him again. Stared into the rain outside, watching it cut silver lines through the night. It never stopped, ma'am. We just stopped listening. Back at Fort Campbell, the debrief room was dark except for the glow of 2 monitors. Lewis sat typing, decrypting files they'd salvaged from the warehouse servers. Lines of code streamed down the screen, rearranging into coordinates, financial ledgers, names. Stood by the window, watching the reflection of her own face in the glass. She didn't look like a ghost anymore. She looked like someone resurfacing. Entered quietly. You did good work tonight. Didn't feel like it. It never does, the general replied. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it just keeps moving. Turned from the window. They'll come for us now. Yes, said, but at least they'll know we're coming too. The silence between them wasn't fear, it was understanding. 2 women bound by war and truth, both too stubborn to yield to either. Outside, thunder rolled across the Tennessee sky. Closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't hear the screams of Syria. She heard rain, just rain. And beneath it, the faint echo of a call sign once thought lost forever. Shadow 4, she whispered to herself, still transmitting. Sleep had become a stranger again. Stared at the ceiling of her quarters, tracing the cracks like coordinates. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that warehouse, calm smile, this light dissolving into screams. She saw her team again, faces lit by fire, shadows fading into silence. The clock read 2:47. She gave up on sleep. In the mirror, her reflection looked older than 28. Eyes that had seen too much. Shoulders that had carried too many names. She tied her hair back, adjusted her fatigues, and slipped her encrypted drive into her pocket. Down the hall, the command wing was dark except for the low hum of the server room. She walked toward it, boots whispering against tile. Captain Lewis was already there, half asleep over a terminal. Empty coffee cups, stacks of files, eyes bloodshot from a 20-hour shift. You ever stop working? She asked. He looked up, smiled faintly. You ever start sleeping? She gave a half shrug. Sleep overrated. He tapped the keyboard, screens lighting up with decrypted fragments from the warehouse servers. You were right, he said. These weren't just arms deals. It's deeper, political, financial, operational overlap between private contractors and intelligence fronts. They've been using Project Bastion as cover for black fund transfers. She leaned closer. Show me the chain. He brought up a document stamped Restricted Strategic Operations Council. Beneath it, a signature. Not. Who's General Mason? She asked. Lewis hesitated. Chair of Strategic Logistics, reports directly to the Joint Chiefs. He was the one who signed off on the Syria operation before it went dark. Felt her throat tighten. He signed our deployment orders. Lewis nodded, and the same man signed the supply manifests for his warehouse. The room felt smaller suddenly. Entered, her presence quiet but commanding. She took one look at the screen and understood instantly. So it's Mason, she said, not a question. Nodded. He's the leak. He fed coordinates to the enemy, then funneled funds to rebuild the same network that killed my team. The general's voice lowered. You have proof. Enough to bury him, Lewis said. But if we move without authorization, we'll be the ones buried first. Crossed her arms, thinking. We can't go through official channels. Mason has reach. He'll see it coming before we're even done drafting the report. "So what do we do?" asked. The general looked at her, long, steady, decisive. "We finish it the way you started it, off the record, quiet, precise. No noise, no recognition." For a moment's expression softened. "You sure you want to do this, ma'am? It could end both our careers." Smiled faintly, a rare crack in her steel. "Some careers aren't worth keeping if you have to lie to keep them." They moved before dawn. No formal orders, no comm logs. Just 3 people operating out of a secured beneath the comm center. Lewis rerouted network access, prepped a field kit, coordinated satellite access through an old clearance code still active under her name, an oversight that would soon be corrected if Mason realized who was using it. "Operation window is 6 hours, Lewis said. "We breach the Bastion database before sunrise, extract the incriminating files, and vanish before the trace hits command." Nodded. "Let's move." Slid into her seat, headset on. The sound of static filled her ears like an old ghost whispering welcome back. "Comm secure," she said, linking shadow frequency. Lewis typed rapidly. "Firewalls thick, Pentagon grade. Whoever built this wasn't just protecting data, they were protecting themselves." "Then let's make them nervous," replied. The code began to crack, line by line, barrier by barrier, until finally the system blinked open. A cascade of files, images, voice logs, internal memos. Leaned in. "What am I looking at?" Lewis scrolled. Contracts between Mason's department and several foreign intermediaries, shipments labeled as humanitarian aid, payments routed through offshore accounts. "Look at this." He clicked an audio file, grainy but clear. Shadow 4's team was expendable. Operational security requires plausible deniability. Proceed with asset elimination. Stomach dropped. She knew that voice. "Mason," she whispered. The general's jaw clenched. "They didn't lose contact in Syria," she said quietly. "They erased you, deliberately." Felt something break loose inside her. Anger, grief, vindication all at once. 5 years of silence compressed into a single heartbeat. "He used us as bait," she said. "Fed intel to both sides, let them collide, then buried the bodies." Didn't speak for a long moment. When she finally did, her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Shook her head. "I do, because I'm the one who survived." Looked at her with something that wasn't pity, it was respect. "Survival isn't guilt, Sergeant. It's the chance to make the truth count." Lewis's fingers stopped moving. "We've got what we need," he said. "All of it, but there's a problem. Someone's inside the network. Countertrace initiated. We've been tagged." His eyes flicked to the screen. "Mason's cyber defense." "Or someone higher," Lewis said. "We've got less than 3 minutes before they triangulate our location." "Shut it down," ordered. "Can't, not fast enough." Reached across the console. "Transfer the files to my drive, now." "Too risky," Lewis protested. "You'll be burned if they—" "Do it." He obeyed. The data transferred, a green bar crawling painfully slow across the screen. Moved toward the comm board. "I'll cut the uplink, buy us 60 seconds." The lights flickered as the base servers overloaded. A faint alarm sounded somewhere in the distance, not loud enough for the entire base, but enough to tell them time was over. "Transfer complete," Lewis shouted. "Pull the plug," said. He yanked the room fell into silence. For a long second, no one breathed. Then spoke quietly. "They'll know someone breached them, but not who." Slid the encrypted drive into her vest pocket. "Then we move fast." The drive out was wordless. The dawn sky glowed faintly over the Tennessee fields, painting the base in pale blue light. Sat in the back of the Jeep, eyes fixed on the horizon. The air smelled like rain and diesel like memory. Drove. Lewis checked his sidearm even though they weren't planning a fight. Finally spoke. "You think this'll matter?" The general didn't look away from the road. "Truth always matters, even when no one believes it. His voice softened. You ever wonder if truth costs more than lies? Smiled faintly. It always does, but lies rot faster. They turned off the main road, heading toward an abandoned radar station that still carried backup satellite access. Inside, dust floated through beams of early sunlight. Old maps lined the walls, relics of wars that never made it to textbooks. Lewis set up his portable terminal. I can upload the files to 3 independent media watchdog servers, redundant backups. Once they go public, no one can bury them. Nodded, do it. Walked toward the window, watching light spill across the tree line. She remembered her team again, Morales with the bad jokes, Singh who always sang before missions, Davis who'd promised to teach her to surf after deployment, all gone because one man traded loyalty for leverage. She closed her eyes. This won't bring them back, she said. No, the general replied, but it'll make sure no one forgets them again. The sound of typing filled the silence. Then, upload complete. Lewis leaned back. It's done. Exhaled slowly. Then it's time to disappear. Turned again. The general met her eyes, this time by choice. Smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's done this before. I have, said, but I was never proud of it. For a moment they stood there in shared silence, 2 soldiers bound not by orders, but by consequence. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere far away, sirens began to wail, the system realizing too late what it had lost. Glanced down at the small drive in her hand, the final copy of everything. Then she closed her fist around it. Sometimes, she said quietly, the only way to stay invisible is to make the truth louder than the lie. The general nodded, and sometimes shadows shine brighter than daylight. The first news reports surfaced 48 hours later. No names, no faces, just phrases whispered through networks that weren't supposed to exist. Unconfirmed leaks from Strategic Operations Council. Possible internal corruption within the Pentagon. Anonymous source exposes arms network linked to senior defense officials. By the time official statements began, it was already too late. The truth had found its frequency. In a small motel off Interstate 40, sat cross-legged on the floor beside a duffel bag and a half-drunk cup of coffee. The television flickered silently. A reporter's lips moved across the screen, subtitles scrolling beneath her face. The Department of Defense has confirmed the initiation of a full-scale investigation into former General Mason. Muted the sound. She didn't need to hear the words. The expression on the anchor's face said enough. It was over, or as over as anything like this ever gets. Rain hammered the windows outside. She stared at the water sliding down the glass, each drop a small, passing truth. A knock at the door. She reached for her sidearm automatically. Old habits die slower than people. Easy, Sergeant, came the voice. It's me. She opened the door. General stood there, rain-soaked, coat clinging to her frame, eyes calm as ever. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. You look like hell, said. Thanks, ma'am, trying to stay consistent. The general smiled faintly, shaking off rain. You've been watching the news. Nodded. They'll call it an isolated scandal. They always do. Maybe, replied, lowering herself into the chair by the bed. But even an isolated scandal changes something. It reminds people the system bleeds like everyone else. Sank onto the bed, the mattress creaking. And what happens to us now? Looked at her with quiet certainty. We disappear. Again. There's no medal for this one, no record, no funeral, just peace if you can live with it. Peace, repeated softly. That's a nice word, never met it though. The general studied her for a long time. You will, one day. By sunrise they were already gone. Separate vehicles, no radio contact, no traceable route. Drove east, the road cutting through fog and forests. She didn't have a destination, just movement. After 5 years of stillness, movement felt holy. She passed through small towns where no one saluted her, no one whispered her call sign, no one expected anything. It was freedom, heavy, fragile, strange. At a gas station outside Roanoke, she filled the tank, then noticed the newspaper at the counter. Mason's face on the front page. The headline read, "Disgraced General under Federal Investigation for Treason." The clerk, a young man barely 20, glanced at her. "Crazy stuff, huh?" She nodded slightly. "Yeah, crazy stuff." He smiled, glad someone's holding them accountable. She paid for the paper and left. In the car, she opened it again, tracing Mason's photograph with her eyes. The man who'd erased her team, buried their memory, called them expendable. Now the world knew his name. Justice, she realized, doesn't roar. It whispers, it waits. She folded the paper, slid it into the glove compartment, and kept driving. 3 weeks later, she stopped by a small military cemetery outside Fayetteville. No one followed her there. No one would. Rows of white headstones stretched across the damp grass. The air smelled of rain and pine. She found the names easily. They were etched into her memory long before they were carved into marble. "Hey," she said quietly, kneeling by the first stone. "I kept my promise." Her hand brushed against the cold surface. "They finally know what happened. I don't know if that fixes anything, but it's something." She stayed like that for a while, listening to the wind. Somewhere nearby, a flag rustled. "I thought hiding would protect me from the ghosts," she said softly. "Turns out, the ghosts were the only ones keeping me honest." The air was still, the world small and wide all at once. She stood slowly, straightened her jacket. "Rest easy, Shadow 4, we're clear." In Washington, General stood before a Senate subcommittee, stone-faced and deliberate. She said what she could without saying too much, framed every truth like a puzzle piece, careful, measured. When asked how she'd come across the intelligence, she simply replied, "A communication anomaly." When pressed further, she added, "Sometimes the quietest voices say the most." Her testimony was classified the same afternoon. But the message rippled through the ranks, not as scandal, but as reminder. Somewhere out there, someone always listens. Back on the road, stopped at a diner overlooking a stretch of highway. Steam rose from her coffee, curling into the light like a signal. She looked out the window, watching a convoy of Humvees pass by in the distance, young soldiers, faces bright with purpose, unaware of the ghosts that had cleared their path. The waitress poured her another cup. "You military?" she asked. Hesitated. "Used to be." The woman smiled. "You all have that look, like you're somewhere else even when you're sitting right here." "Yeah," said softly, "somewhere else." The woman walked away and sipped her coffee, eyes unfocused. The world outside was ordinary again, birds on a wire, trucks rolling past, sunlight breaking through morning mist. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible, just unseen in the right way. Her phone buzzed once, a single text. No name, just a number she recognized. "Transmission received. Shadows acknowledged. Frequency clear. PE." She smiled faintly, then deleted the message. Evening settled like ash over the mountains as she reached the overlook near Blue Ridge. She stepped out of the car, wind tugging at her hair, the horizon bleeding orange into violet. She closed her eyes. In the silence, she heard echoes of her team again, their laughter, their arguments, their voices crackling through radios. But this time it didn't hurt. It grounded her. The wind carried a faint whisper, a sound only she could recognize. "Shadow 4, do you copy?" She whispered back, "Always." A hawk cut across the sky, wings catching the last light. She watched it soar, weightless, fearless, above everything that tried to hold it down. For the first time in 5 years, breathed without waiting for orders. Later that night, in a small diner notebook, she wrote her first words in months. Not for report, not for mission, but for memory. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's survival. Sometimes you don't disappear because you're weak. You disappear because the world needs space to remember you right. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She closed the notebook. No signature, no rank, just peace in the space where names used to be. Outside, the rain started again, soft, steady, cleansing. And somewhere deep in the encrypted silence of a government server, an inactive call sign blinked faintly for the first time in years.